food is also our medicine, right? It would have been the only medicine we had before pharmaceuticals were introduced. And I'm fully aligned with that kind of holistic approach that recognizes that our bodies have this innate ability to flourish when things are going well, and also to heal itself when things do go wrong. So we're not designed to malfunction. We're not supposed to feel groggy and rubbish, but we do need to respect our bodies, and we need to nourish them in order that we can feel at our best.
Hello and welcome to the Mama Culture. This is a place for you to be supported, inspired, and resourced on your unique journey through motherhood. I'm your host, Corey Zorns, a fellow mama, here to bring you information and wisdom on parenting, wellness, personal growth, and everything in between so you can thrive as a modern mama. So grab your favorite warm drink, settle in, and get ready for relatable, honest, and empowering conversations about the most important job in the world. This is the Mama Culture. Hi, Francesca. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm very excited about our conversation because we are diving into holistic nutrition, food, feeding babies, something that I am so passionate about, something that I really love, and nutrition has also been a big passion of mine and something that I've studied for the last 10 years. So I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. And I love what you're doing with this mission to create a village. I know how important connection is, and especially when you venture into motherhood. So it's an honor to be a part of that.
Thank you so much. Okay, so why don't we start off with you just telling us a bit about yourself, your journey with Feed Baby Love Nutrition, which is your brand, and then also just about your family and what you do.
I'm Francesca Newell. I'm a baby nutrition consultant. I live here in the UK with my husband, our two beautiful children who keep me very busy. I am actually mama to them. Normally it's mum or mummy in the UK, but they call me mama, so very appropriate. Cecilia is 3 and Mikio is coming up 1 soon. That feels like quite an emotional milestone actually when I think about it, because he's my last baby. So I'm trying to cherish all the snuggles and the feeding and the onesies and the things that don't last very long. Loving all of that. But Feed Baby Love is my passion project. I started this almost 3 years ago now. You and I have talked about how we both thrive off having that purpose beyond motherhood that fills our bucket, and that's what Feed Baby Love is for me. It's really important to me, and there are 3 pillars to it really. So firstly, I offer support for parents on their feeding journey, whether it's one-to-one consultations, whether it's group courses as well, either for those that are wanting guidance as they start out and just where do I start kind of thing, or those who have little ones that are experiencing some challenges along the way and they want some support with that. And I also have an online shop. So that's the second pillar. So there's a select range of eco-friendly bibs and tableware on there. And that's designed to support little hands as they're and then finally, the third pillar I'm hugely passionate about: democratizing knowledge, putting information out there, putting guides out there, helping all families, whether or not they've got access to personalized support, whether that's something that's affordable to them. So I do have an Instagram account. I've got a modest following and I love to put content out there. I've written various articles and blog posts on all topics baby food related. And of course, I jumped at the chance to talk to you today to continue that mission as well.
Amazing. Thank you. And how did this deep path of holistic nutrition, how did you get inspired to jump into this?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in fate and serendipity and all of the rest. And it felt almost as if the O Baby School of Holistic Nutrition, where I studied, found me when I needed it. So I was lucky enough to be supported by a virtual doula with my daughter. I don't know if you've come across anything like that, but it was fantastic. And she recommended O Baby to me as a resource as a parent, when I was starting to think about starting my daughter on solids. Myself, I've always been into health and well-being generally, but specifically, I really wanted to dive into infant nutrition at that time because it was so relevant for me. And I wanted to have the knowledge from my family that I was really craving to support our unit. But I also wanted to get qualified and to support other families too. Had a real urge to spread the message and help others. And I see such a gap, at least in the UK. I think it's true across the board though. There's a gap for that kind of really truthful, unwatered down nutrition information that's relevant and specific for babies, because a lot of the guidelines and the resources here, they tend to be more focused on let's just make sure we keep your baby alive rather than what do we do to make them thrive. So you hear, just don't give them too much salt, avoid raw honey, eggs, and just crack on with it. But I instinctively felt that actually we should be taking a much more mindful approach to respect to babies' tiny developing digestive system and their high nutrient needs as they're growing. So I was drawn to the boldness of the information that OBaby share. It's very credible, it's science-backed, it's based on the traditional wisdom of food that I think we've lost touch with so much in this sort of modern Western food culture. And did lots of homework, and there's nowhere else in the world that I could have got that knowledge that's so specific to babies. And to address your question around holistic nutrition and why that path, food is definitely one of the tools we have to holistically support our health, a very important one, and our children's health, of course, with today's conversation. A lot of people, I think, see food as something that we do to fill us up, energize us for the day. Maybe they're focusing on physical growth, especially with babies, and tracking the growth charts. But food is also our medicine, right? It would have been the only medicine we had before pharmaceuticals were introduced. And I'm fully aligned with that kind of holistic approach that recognizes that our bodies have this innate ability to flourish when things are going well, and also to heal itself when things do go wrong. So we're not designed to malfunction. We're not supposed to feel groggy and rubbish. But we do need to respect our bodies, and we need to nourish them in order that we can feel at our best and prevent things from going wrong further down the road. And because babies are at the very start of that journey, I'm not trying to pile the pressure onto listeners, but the choices that you will make as a parent do impact your child's lifelong relationship with food. So it's that beautiful window of opportunity to set them up with a really strong foundation for health and happiness in the long term, isn't it?
Yeah, the gut has a direct connection to our brain. It has a direct connection to how we feel as human beings, how we think. That's what got me so passionate on this path. 10 years ago, I started studying food and nutrition and realized that we have such a capability to heal ourselves and to change our minds and to change the way we think and to change the way we walk around the world through food. So I've been on a deep path with it and I love it so much. And when River turned 6 months and I started incorporating food into his diet, before he turned 6 months, I realized we don't know. It's not just information in our society that we've forgotten. So I didn't know how to feed him. I didn't know what foods to introduce, how to introduce allergens, how to build his gut, and how his digestive system builds through over time to feed him in a way that really supports him. This is not information that mamas know. And I think it's information that has been forgotten over time because we live in an age that when we were children, we were probably mostly fed baby food in little glass bottles, or maybe our moms made some stuff. We can talk about the food industry and everything else, but I feel like this is stuff that we really have to learn. So I love that you have spent your time learning it, doing the OBaby course. I looked into that course as well. They look amazing. I learned a lot from Luca, who does boob to food and milk to meals.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Luca as well.
Yeah, I will link that as well. But her book was like my handbook in learning how to feed River. And I'm just fascinated by how much there is to learn. And especially as busy mamas, it's like a whole new thing to study and a whole new thing to learn. And I hope with this conversation today that we can break some things down for mamas because there's definitely a lot there in introducing foods and how to build resilient babies and how it all works. So,
yeah, and a little bit of information can go such a long way, can't it? You don't need to go into the depths of it if you're not into that, but having a framework and some sort of guidance gives you the confidence to then go with it and then follow your instincts as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with what is the foundations of introducing foods to babies and to building resilient babies? What are the foundational things that you think are so important to share with mamas?
I love to get into the detail of nutrition. I love to nerd out, but I appreciate that not everyone is that way inclined. And as we've just spoken about, we're all so busy. So one of the things I like to do to help parents is take that complexity, bake it into something that's consumable and actionable. And I like to, when I'm working with clients, give them 3 takeaways. If you only focus on 3 things, this is it for today. So for building that resilience and building that strong foundation of health for your baby, we can keep it fairly simple. So firstly, whole foods approach to food. It's a no-brainer, minimally processed, nutrient-dense whole foods, and we can talk about some of the examples of what that might be. Ideally prepared at home, That is the one thing you can do to make the biggest impact. Secondly, variety. That's especially important in the first 18 months of solids. So for your under twos, but throughout their lives as well. But the more exposure you can pack in to your baby's experience, different textures, flavors, smells, colors, the better. And that's important because, of course, it ensures that they're getting all the nourishment they need from nutrients across different food groups. But not just nutrients, think about prebiotics. So these are the carbohydrates in our food. And you talked about gut health. It's super important. So much more research coming out about this now. But the prebiotics, they're things that our bodies can't digest. But it's a way of feeding, the little pets in our gut microbiome, those beneficial bacteria. So variety helps with that. And also a varied diet protects us from overdoing a particular food. So even healthy foods can contain substances that if we have too much of them, they might be harmful to our health. So if you've got a baby that loves spinach, you're not going to feed them spinach every day because actually it's high in some things like oxalates, which aren't great if we're having too much. So you want to protect from having too much of anything. And then there's the benefit that variety really sets the stage for more adventurous eating as well. First one, whole food. Second one, variety. And then a third thing around building a foundation for food is knowing your child as an individual. No two babies or children are the same. So any sort of generic blanket advice, recommended intakes, that kind of thing, it's not necessarily always going to work for your child. So we need to trust what our instincts are telling us because we know them better than anyone. So if a particular food on paper is really healthy, so something like eggs or dairy, if that doesn't seem to work for your child at this moment, don't just ignore that and try and plow on with it anyway. And our babies, they can't tell us in words how they feel after eating something. We know how we feel after eating things, but you've got to tune in really closely to their mood, any symptoms they're experiencing. And if there is an issue and you think, oh, I think that's diet related, or I think there's something going on in the gut there, but I don't quite know what it is, I'm going to work with a practitioner. So that could be a nutritionist, a naturopath, your doctor. The knowledge that you have about your child when you're working with that person is just as important as their experience and their knowledge. So it's the marrying of that information, your knowledge of the child, their experience and their knowledge, and those two forces will help you pinpoint what's going on here and enable you to address it, really. So I'd say that's three good things to focus on as a starting point.
I really resonate with what you said about tuning in. I think we talk about food, and this might be feeding your baby at 6 months and introducing and starting from the beginning, or it might be feeding a 2 or 3-year-old or an older child. But feeding our children, I feel like even there's so much that it does more than just food. It's like we're really building our humans. We're really building their guts. We're really building this relationship with how they look at food for the rest of their lives. And I love what you said about being in tune with our children. When they can't speak to us, it's like when they do eat something, how are they handling it? How are they feeling? Noticing their mood, noticing when they go to the bathroom. I noticed that with my little one. I'm mostly lactose intolerant. I'm half Japanese, and I know it's in a lot of Asian cultures being lactose intolerant.
Yes.
And I know I can't do cheese. Dairy and cheese does not work well with me, but sometimes I just love it. Sometimes I want to eat it. So I was noticing that whenever I had cheese, just from breastfeeding River, and he's 1.5 now, I was like, oh, he eats so much solid food. We still breastfeed a good amount, but I'm like, how would me eating cheese just through my breast milk still be affecting him? And I would pay really close attention to how he's feeling in the bathroom. And I'm like realizing, oh my God, when I eat cheese, it affects him. So there's so much of a relationship, food and moms and babies, and it's just a really deep, important one. And it's just beautiful to understand the importance of it. And it's more than food.
And you want to teach them to know and recognize how their body's feeling after they've eaten a particular food, so that as they grow up, they're going to make choices that are good for them. And I had a similar experience, not through breastfeeding, but with my daughter. It was fructose intolerance, and it's not something I'd come across before in a sort of professional capacity, but she was eating all these healthy foods. You've got fructose in fruit and vegetables and whole grains. And we had to work really hard to navigate that and understand what it was, because just something wasn't right. Now she's a lot better and she tolerates a lot of fruit, and because we've stripped out, we've worked on her gut health and we've gradually introduced it back in. But I do know if she goes over her threshold amount, it's not just the physical symptoms of what's happening in the stools and the tummy aches, but it's irritability, or she's just not quite right. She's been a bit naughty. And I think, oh, what have you had at nursery today? So it's for us to notice, and hopefully she can recognize that as she grows up of what works too.
Yeah, I love that. Hopefully it gives them more ability to be in tune and aware of what makes them feel good and not feel good.
Yeah.
River, like, I'm so passionate. I love food. We make all of his food at home. I'm so particular. And he does not have sugar. I love some maple syrup and some coconut sugar. I'll have that in my diet sometimes. And every once in a while I have something really yummy and I'm like, oh, I just want to give him a little bite of this, or like some honey or maple syrup. And I've given him where like he's taken some big bites, and I notice the effect on his energy levels and his mood, or he gets a little anxious. And I'm like, wow, when you are really in tune, when you really pay attention, we can see how food can affect our children so easily.
Yeah, and he's still so little, so every bite counts. But hopefully as he gets bigger, that he's going to be able to enjoy some honey on pancakes.
Definitely. Okay, so my next question is, what are some of the biggest nutrients that our babies need, and where are these sources coming from so we can support them in getting the nutrients that they need to thrive?
Great question. It's funny because the baby's first exploration of food is absolutely going to be a lot of fun. And I think we focus on that, don't we? Or we're really looking forward to it. We're looking forward to watching them get all sorts around their face. But it's a pretty serious business at the same time, because around 6 months, when they start displaying those signs of readiness to start solids, that's the same time at which they start to require important nourishment from food to fuel the period of rapid growth and development that they're going through. So breast milk formula is going to remain as the primary source of nourishment until 12 months. But we also need to start introducing them to the things that they're going to need in order to get their nourishment from food, especially once they transition to 12 months. And as we've said, the baby's tiny tummies, right? So every bite does count. So specifically, the nutrients that are essential for nourishing babies as they transition into toddlerhood and beyond. Firstly, iron is one to mention. It tends to be the one that most people think of. It's on the radar because a baby's iron requirement from 6 to 12 months is the same as an adult male. It's 11 milligrams, but we don't need to get too scientific, but it's a crazy amount of iron that they need. And for that reason, you do see a lot of foods that are marketed for babies that are fortified with iron, so like rice cereal. But it is preferable to get iron from whole food sources instead of the synthetic versions. It's much harder for our bodies to absorb and assimilate the nutrients when they're synthetic. It can lead to constipation in babies because they are so delicate. So good food sources like red meat, fish, egg yolks, if you're tolerating those, they're all great sources of iron. And we do have plant-based non-heme sources of iron like lentils and tomatoes. It's not as easy to absorb, but a good tip for that is pairing those foods with vitamin C, and that helps to aid the absorption of iron in the meal. So iron's a big one. Omega-3 is another key nutrient, and specifically DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids. This helps to fuel brain development, and about a third of our brains are made of DHA. If you don't eat fish in your family for whatever reason, you should think about supplementing. So either with a fish oil, if you're happy to use an oil instead of the fish itself, or algae-based supplement if you're avoiding fish altogether. Vitamin D3, adults and children should all be supplementing with this, at least in the UK. I'm obviously aware I'm talking to someone living in the sunshine, so you might be okay with getting some safe sun exposure without sun cream for your D3. It can be found in some foods like butter and oily fish, so again, animal foods, but you're unlikely to get enough that way. It's quite difficult to get enough even then. So formula-fed babies will be getting this in their formula, but breastfed babies should be supplemented with a drop, and as you look to weaning them off milk, they should be supplemented as well. Choline is one that's less well known. Most parents, when I talk about this one, haven't heard of it, but there's a growing body of research on the importance of choline for babies' development, particularly again with regards to the brain. There's so much happening in the brain and memory. So eggs are good for this. Brussels sprouts at Christmas, salmon, poultry, lentils. Get Googling, lots of great sources out there for choline. And then finally, calcium. So that is, as we know, vital for our bones and our teeth. Also serves other roles like in nerve and muscle function. It's mainly one to watch once baby starts weaning off their breast milk or formula, of course. You don't have to replace either of those with cow's milk. Parents often choose to do that, but if not, there are a variety of calcium-rich food sources to ensure they're getting enough, particularly if you're worried about lactose intolerance like yourself. Other than yogurt and kefir and milk, you've got sardines, you've got chia seeds, almonds, broccoli. There's lots of other things you can do to get calcium into the diet. But I think the important thing is I do like to talk about those focused nutrients, but I also don't want people to be bogged down in getting too scientific about this stuff. We don't need to isolate nutrients and focus on them one by one. All too often we associate baby food with like fruit and vegetable purees, or even baby-led weaning, which is so popular now. That kind of conjures up images of baby holding a piece of broccoli, doesn't it? Or at least with me. But those foods, they're great, but a piece of broccoli alone it's not got the healthy fats, it's not got the protein, it's not got those micronutrients that we've just talked about as being so important for babies. So it's good to focus on nutrient density as well. I'm happy to share some examples. I know we were talking about broth yesterday, so let's start there, shall we? Because we both love to have a good bone broth on the go. And that's been a traditional staple for so many traditions and cultures for thousands of years, and used in things like Chinese medicine. It's liquid gold for the gut, right? It's nutrient dense, it's easy to digest, it helps to nourish and seal the gut lining because you've got the gelatin and the glutamine. You don't have to worry about what's in there, but all these things working together to seal the gut in properly prepared broth. And I love that it's a really accessible staple for families. So whatever your budget, you can go to your butcher, you can find organic grass-fed bones and other cuts, get some cartilage in there for pennies, really, or cents. And you bung it all in a pot, put some veggies in, cook it on low and slow, freeze it if you want to in, I use the silicone ice cube trays. I don't know if you use that when you're starting solids, but they're just baby sized portions, aren't they? And you've always got something quick and handy in the freezer. And that's a great thinning liquid for purees. It's a base for casseroles and stews, and you can offer it as a drink. My daughter has a cup of broth every night before bed with her story. It's a beautiful sort of warming ritual for her before she goes to sleep. And I think that's something that's helped her to overcome a lot of the issues she was having with fructose as well. So that's the great one. Fermented foods. So this is another one that stems from traditional cuisine. I think historically fermentation has been used for preserving foods, but now we're so much more aware of the other benefits that preserving foods in that way brings. And of course, it means we don't have to add nasty chemical additives and plastic packaging to everything to keep it fresh. It can be as simple as yogurt if you want to start simple, but you can get more adventurous. I love lacto fermented vegetables, sauerkraut. I don't know have you ever tried River on anything like that that's got quite a sour taste to it?
Yep. Sauerkraut was one of his intro foods at 6 months.
Love it. And it's great because that flavor really broadens the palate as well, doesn't it? Not just sweet flavors, but sour, bitter, get the full mix in there. And of course, you've got the probiotics in fermented vegetables. So the beneficial bacteria for our gut microbiome, the prebiotics are in there too, which I've talked about. You don't typically find those in supplements, providing that fuel for the bacteria. And if your baby has had to have antibiotics, sometimes unavoidable, if you've had to have them during pregnancy or breastfeeding, if your baby's formula fed, born via C-section, these are all kind of factors that can interfere with the colonization of bacteria in their gut. And it gives more reason to focus on the regular inclusion of small amounts of fermented food. Start with really small amounts. And it's easier to digest, loads of benefits. We could have a whole conversation on fermented foods. I've got loads of jars on my kitchen side with various concoctions in there. So that's another favourite. And then a final one to mention is liver or organ meats, a real superfood powerhouse of nutrients, especially for babies. It's one of my son's favourites. I'm very happy about that because it's a great source of iron. It's got the choline, it's got the even vitamin D3 in there. And again, quite an affordable cut because they tend to be less fashionable to eat liver. A lot of adults don't really have the palate for it, probably because we haven't been fed it as children. But the organ meats are far more nutrient dense than muscle meats like your steak or your chicken breast, which we tend to focus on a lot in our food culture. It is a very rich food, so you don't need to go mad, just little bits, small portions once or twice a week. And if you can't get on board with that, you can use the freeze-dried liver whole food supplements and sprinkle that into a meal as well. So 3 ideas for getting started. A great place to start.
Thank you. I think like organ meats are making a comeback. I
I
think
think so.
when we were kids, we were like, ew, but nowadays, like organ meats, whether you buy fresh liver and cook it or take capsules here in Bali, people understand it and are incorporating into their
Yes.
diets. And yeah, I also followed Weston Price. Do you know Weston
Yeah,
Price?
I do. Yeah.
I love Weston Price. I followed a
Mm,
lot of his information when I was pregnant and a lot of his information while feeding River. And I think this information is so important, not just for feeding our babies, but also as we're pregnant and feeding our babies
yeah.
through
Yeah.
what we eat. That's when I really started looking into what are these nutrients, because it's not just nutrients that babies need, it's nutrients that mamas need. Mamas
Hmm.
need these nutrients as they grow the baby, and mamas need these nutrients as they breastfeed. One of the teachers that I learned from, she was talking about omegas and DHA. And she said, we give it to our babies through breast milk, and it's so important for them for their brain development. And if our body does not have enough through
Mm,
intaking it from food, it will literally bleach it from our brains. And the
yeah.
same thing with calcium. It will, if we don't intake enough, it will leach it from our teeth and from our bones. Our bodies will sacrifice to feed our babies. So I love what you said about these superfoods like bone broth and fermented foods and liver. And the great thing is it's great for our children and it's great for mamas too. So you
Great.
can make it and
Exactly.
the whole family can have it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always frying up liver and shoving a bit in for myself as well.
Yeah, these foods that are so good for our babies are so good for the whole family. We are always making bone broth. We have a slow cooker.
Oh.
So we just throw it all in the slow cooker and let it sit
Hmm.
overnight.
Love it.
And I haven't made my own fermented foods yet. I'd like to. We buy some here and our family does a little, not too much of it, but I do love the fermented foods. And we do a lot of organ meats and liver, and they feel like superfoods. When I'm eating them, like I can tell
Mm,
how
mm,
nutrient dense they are, and the nutrients are bioavailable. So our body knows what to do with it, how to
yeah.
convert it, and how to use it. And then we also started River even before he was eating. We started him on a fish oil supplement, which I did a lot of studies, and I was reading that you could start it at 4 months.
Yeah.
Starting them on a fish oil that really helps brain development. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much to dive into and so much that moms can learn.
Yeah, well, you're fully on board. And also, all of these things that you're doing to nourish yourself and nourish your family now, it's not just the impact it has on both of you, but the thing I like about Western Price and what that kind of brings to the surface is actually it's affecting the next generation. So, your grandchildren
Yeah.
and their
Mm.
children through epigenetics, we're finding more and more
Yeah.
about that actually you're improving the health for future generations. So, I just
Yeah.
think that's so beautiful and so worthwhile.
Yeah. I was just talking about that in one of my other podcasts. What a
Oh,
mom eats affects 3 generations. So it affects our
yes.
children, our grandchildren, and our great grandchildren,
Hmm.
what we eat. And wow, that is profound. And that is what makes me so passionate about food and nutrients. And not everyone is that passionate. So it's like, how can we make this as easy as possible for the mamas that don't have all the time to make all the
Yeah.
food and to dive to all the information? But that's where it might be batching things, freezing it, getting
Hmm.
silicone ice cube trays for bone broth, maybe
Mm,
trading food with another family or another mama. There's
love
ways to
that.
support in making it easier because you can go down a whole rabbit hole of how to feed babies and prepare food for
Yeah,
them. And
yeah, yeah,
then
you
there's
could.
6 months and half the food ends up on the floor sometimes, most of the food. But yeah, we love all of it. We do sardines at our house. And
Oh,
it
that's
just,
another one that should be on the list. Love that. Sardine.
yeah, sardines are so good. And it's so much more than just food.
Hmm.
And I think there's a way to make this food journey fun. I know it could be a lot. I know going through it, I was like, okay, because it can be stressful. Sometimes mamas are like, I don't want to give them whole foods. Like, I want to do purees. So
Yeah,
there can be a lot about the food journey. But I think just trying to make it simple and fun for mamas, I think is a good way to go about it while
yeah,
being resourced with as much information as you can.
yeah. And just do one thing at a time. If you've never made a broth before,
Yeah.
don't start pickling and making
Yeah.
broths and frying up liver. Just pick your one thing you're going to do that week, and it becomes a
Yeah.
habit, becomes easier, and then over time layer more on top. That's how I've approached it.
Yeah. Yeah, which goes into my next question. What do you think makes it hard for mamas to feed our babies in a way that really supports them, supports their gut health and their brain development? What stops us and our mamas from doing it in a way that supports babies? What do you think the biggest like limiting
Hmm.
factors are?
Yeah, so even if you get past the inconvenience of getting into these things, which over time become more natural, You could do everything in your control to nourish your child, set them up with really good eating habits, keep toxic ingredients out of the home. But our babies grow into children, our children grow into teens and adults, and they're going to hit the big wide world and integrate into a society that's, let's face it, it's pitted against most of these concepts that we're talking about. And we've all grown up in this generation of processed food. I'm reading a really eye-opening book at the moment called Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Talken. It's got a lot of press over here. So he talks about ultra processed food, or UPF. And sadly, that is the culture that we live in, isn't it? And that our children are growing up in. And it's something like 60% of the average diet, at least in the UK and the US and other similar countries, is coming from ultra processed food. And that's average. So that means that some children are going to be having 80% of their diet from processed food. And it makes me so angry that the government has failed to put policies in place to protect us from this happening. This is a real public health crisis. So the last thing I want to do is shame parents, especially mothers. My beef is with the misleading marketing practices and the manipulation of food products that are tricking our bodies into wanting more. So we just need to make sure that we're informed. And I think the truth can feel quite uncomfortable, but we just can't let the food system dictate what our children should be eating, because that agenda to extract more profit by replacing what's real food with synthetic concoctions born in a lab, that doesn't align with parents' goals that we've talked about, which is to nourish and protect their children. And I think a really real example of that for new parents is the baby food aisle in the supermarkets. Why do we have a baby food aisle? It's ridiculous, because that gives the message that when your baby hits 6 months, and many of them are labeled from 4 months, you visit the aisle, you've got a brightly coloured array of these processed sugary mush. It's conveniently squeezed into a little plastic pouch, and the packet tells you what to do and when to feed them. And you go through the stages so they can get more and more money out of you as you progress through all these different flavors that are essentially the same, aren't they? So I think that's an example of the food industry telling us something that's crazy when you unpack it, but it has come to be accepted as normal. People are spending their precious money in the midst of a cost of living crisis on boxes of really expensive products because they think that's the best thing and the safest thing for their child, and they're not supported with the other information they need to go the other path. I'm not saying it's poison, by the way. We all need to lean on the odd convenience item from time to time, but that's what it is. It's a convenience. It's not a substitute for proper nutrition. And I think they belong in the ready meal aisle. I don't know if you have that concept, ready meals. They belong there rather than a dedicated aisle. So yeah, I think we need to try and take back some ownership of our children's long-term health. It's very scary to me that we might look back one day and think our children were guinea pigs to all these food additives and these chemicals and processes, and we didn't really know what was going to happen. And I just hope it goes sort of the full 360 and goes back the other way. But that's just starting out. That's just babies. And then you get into daycare and nursery and school meals. And the reality hit me when I sent my daughter to daycare at 18 months. Obviously, being a bit of a nutrition nerd, I was reading through the menu. I nearly fell off my chair when I read that menu because I just finished studying with O Baby, and none of the principles that I'd learned about were aligned with what I was seeing on this menu in front of me. So I think it's important to try and stand up, voice your concerns, get together with other mothers to do that and make a stand. I certainly tried my best. There were some changes that were made. It's still not perfect. And having said all that, do you know what? On the flip side of the coin, I'm not trying to paint a really depressing picture. I think what I've learned to do as a parent is know when to relax and accept that I can't control everything. So there's this concept of the 80-20 rule that you hear in diet culture. I'm not a fan of diets, especially not for children. But I find that concept quite comforting because it's basically saying you can let loose from time to time. And I've learned to do that. So in terms of my family, that might mean we go out for a meal together. I don't know what ingredients or oils they're using and all of the rest, but my daughter eats off the menu. My 11-month-old doesn't, but my daughter, a 3-year-old, does. Or if there's a special occasion, there's a party, we're eating cake and sausage roll for lunch, fine. But that's the kind of 20% of the time when we don't eat so well category. And instead of feeling frustrated that my hard work is ruined the second they step outside of the home, I see it actually as I've worked really hard to build a rock solid foundation of nourishment and positive food habits for my kids. And that's so strong that the occasional junk meal, it's not going to break it. They do need to grow up. They need to make their own decisions. And I don't think you can hide unhealthy foods and choices from them. We don't want to demonize foods. it might even make it go the other way, and they'll be more enticed by those foods. So I think we just have to show them that those foods are out there. It's something we can occasionally eat. We can, especially when it's part of some social enjoyment, spending time together, but we don't eat them all the time because it doesn't feel good in our bodies when the balance is tipped too far in the wrong direction.
Yeah, like what you said, it's about building a rock solid foundation. It's about trying our best to build a great foundation. And then also just relaxing and releasing control, because our little ones are going to grow up. They're going to be out there. They're going to make their own decisions and eat some weird foods. And all we can do is, I think, especially starting out when they're young, is just try to build up the best guts, the best microbiomes that we can. And we do have to take a stand because no one else out there is looking out for us. Like, the food industry is not looking out for us. The government is not looking out for us. The things that are okay to be in foods and additives and chemicals, it just blows my mind. And that's where I find so much importance of taking control and taking our power back and coming back to our kitchens and making food. And that can be a lot for busy parents. So it's, what can support you in making it simple and making it easy and prepping larger meals and freezing stuff or trading with another family. Because there's a lot to it, and not everyone's super passionate about being in the kitchen, but finding a way where you're not just relying on going to the store and buying these packaged foods and going out to eat and not knowing what's on restaurant menus and what they cook with. So there's something really powerful about coming back to your own kitchen where you know the ingredients and what's put into your food. And I find something really healing about coming back to our kitchens to feed our children.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as a piece of fish and vegetables and some, butternut squash. It doesn't have to be. I'm not a really great chef myself. Just keep it simple. The work is more in the planning and the preparation and getting the food in, and then the cooking piece doesn't have to be intense.
Yeah, I like it simple too. I am not a crazy chef. I like to keep it super simple for us at home, getting sweet potatoes and just boiling them. And then we keep a bunch of boiled sweet potatoes in the fridge. And then our freezer is stocked with great organic, grass-fed meats, wild fish, sardines. We leave it all in our freezer. Then every couple of days, we pull something out of the freezer and defrost it. And we just keep it super simple and super easy. And so Rivers learned to grow up eating that way, of just eating whole foods, no fancy chefed up stuff. And we keep it super simple. We keep it manageable for us. So I think there's always a way for mamas to see what works for them, but to take their power back, because no one is looking out for us and for our children with food. Our society is not set up in a way that it helps us in building resilient kids. It helps us in knowing what superfoods are actually good and what is just branding and marketing and trying to make more money.
Yeah. Sometimes I get so angry about these things, and I'll read a study and I'll tell my husband about it, and he's fully supportive of me and feeding our family. But he'll say, yeah, but you do have quite an extreme opinion. And I say, why am I the extreme one? That I don't want to feed my child some sort of byproduct of crude oil production and they're crackers. Why is that extreme?
I so get it. I am an extremist too. It's not even an extreme. I'm just so passionate. I'm so passionate about the effect that food has on us, food that has on our families, as mamas, as babies. The effect that food has on us and what we put into our bodies is truly building us and going into ourselves and literally making us who we are. So I am with you on your passion for that.
I'll rant to you next time.
I know, when you get upset, I think message me. So what do you think would, and we talked about this a little bit, but what do you think would support mamas the most? What do you think mamas need to know, mamas need to hear to support them in feeding their little ones?
So kind of moving away from what's on the plate for your baby, I think arguably it's just as important to consider that whole environment when you're feeding your babies. And it's something that the mamas can then really enjoy as well and look forward to instead of dreading meal times. Welcome your baby to their seat at the family table. The benefits of family meals is starting to receive a lot more attention in the research. So I just mean sitting together as a family and eating, as simple as that, whatever your household looks like. Discussing the day, creating a really social experience around food, even talking to your baby. It's celebrated in more cultures than others and more families than others. But that enjoyment factor is a great reason to do it. It's also because of this research that we're seeing that babies and toddlers that have joined their families for meals at the table have a really strong correlation later on in life with healthier food intake, reduced fussiness, greater food enjoyment. There's loads and loads of reasons to start making that a habit early on. And babies are little sponges as well, so they'll be absorbing what we're doing, and they'll be learning about using cutlery and modeling chewing and swallowing safely. They'll naturally pick up on that without you having to stress out about it or teach them. It's just going to happen as a byproduct of that beautiful environment that you're creating. So even if you can do one meal a day, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it doesn't matter. I think making that a priority is really helpful. And then another thing, just to point out quickly, because this comes up so much with my clients and when I'm talking to parents, is the frustration around if they've experienced fussy eating, or a baby that's not wanting to, if you've spent all this effort preparing ingredients, cooking something, and it's thrown on the floor, they're not even opening their mouth, or they're a bit older and they're refusing to eat it. That can be so frustrating. I think expect that a little bit with a new baby when you're introducing a new food, whether it's a new texture or flavor, just something they haven't had before. It can take up to sort of 10, 20 sometimes exposures for them to accept that, because you want to build familiarity. So use those ice cube trays, just give them a tiny bit. You're not wasting too much then. And then defrost it next time, and it's quick, it's ready to go, and just keep going. Don't give up on things that they reject. And then if you're thinking more about a slightly older child that maybe they were eating things that now they're rejecting, or if they're just really limited to a small number of foods, if you've got concern about impacting their growth, you want to see a professional about that. But if you think it's just a phase of fussy eating, it can be really reassuring to know that these phases are completely normal, completely expected. They typically don't last very long unless we as parents overreact, and that can prolong the duration, because the child's, I'm getting a reaction, and then it kind of fuels itself into this vicious circle. So first of all, just take comfort. That may happen, particularly after the 6 to 9 month. That's when they tend to eat anything you offer them. And then maybe 9 months, they want to assert their growing independence, and you start to see a bit more fussy eating, and then toddlerhood again. One thing that I love to keep in mind is the division of responsibility framework. So this is by Ellen Satter, and it's just a really helpful tool that every parent can keep top of mind when they're feeding their children. And what she says is that parents or caregivers, we are responsible for choosing what foods we offer our children, when to time their meals, and where they're going to eat, at the table, in the high chair kind of thing. The child has full responsibility over whether to eat or how much to eat. And actually that can feel a bit unnatural, because we all want to stuff them with nutrients, right? But you cannot force a child to eat. You cannot control whether they're going to eat or not. So just take that out of the equation. Take the pressure off yourself. You've done your job by getting that food to them on the table, and avoid bribery and coaxing them one more spoonful type things, because eventually they will eat. They know what's good for their bodies. So it's just take that pressure off yourself.
I love that. And if they're hungry, they will eat. I so get it, because I am the mama that always wants to make sure River gets enough food. Like, he has a big belly and he gets tons of breast milk from me, and he eats so much. Like, we have lamb and eggs for breakfast. Like, he eats like a king.
Like
it's
a bodybuilder.
Just unreal. Oh my gosh. But I am always still worried. Is he eating enough? Is he getting enough this meal? Did he eat 3 meals a day plus snacks? Like, it's just this constant concern of wanting him to get enough nutrients and keep his big belly and be so well fed. So I love that. It's just our responsibility to get the right foods there, when they can eat, how they're going to eat, and then they choose if they're going to eat or not. And just really trusting them, trusting our little ones, and trusting when they're hungry, and trusting that if they are hungry, they will eat. And, if one meal they get just a couple bites in, like, they'll be okay. It's a reminder to myself.
Yeah, they've got really good innate appetite self-regulation. And if we interfere with that by encouraging them to eat past the point of fullness, as adults, they're going to grow up and be confused about that too. So it's just trusting him. But I know I'm also a feeder, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
I love that, though. That was also why we decided to do baby-led feeding at 6 months when we started introducing foods. Like, we let him be the guide, the director, using his hands, feeding himself, using utensils. And it was never us putting food purees on a spoon and spoon feeding him, because I did read about oftentimes we're ignoring their own innate ability to say when they've had enough if we're just putting spoons of puree in their mouth and not paying attention to them. So for that fact, I really love baby-led eating and letting them show us. And I also love sitting down for family meal times. We try to all sit down together at the table once per
Lovely.
day for family meal time. I think it's so important and really just bonds the whole family together. And it lets our children come and see that food is more than just food. It's a bonding, it's
Hmm.
an experience, it's nurturing, and it really grows our whole family. We always sit down together and bless our food as well. We've started this since River's been like 1 year old, so he'll always bless our food. And even if I forget, he
Oh,
will bless my plate for me. And yeah, so we love just
oh.
adding this gratitude and this experience into mealtime together. So we show appreciation and love and nurturing for our food.
That's lovely. And it's also a pause,
Yeah.
because if we're rushing
Yeah.
to the table and like, oh, I've got 10 minutes to eat my meal, and
Uh,
you're not chewing. So if you pause, it's much better for your digestive system as well. Um,
yeah. And I think
and
for us moms, it's really easy to rush. I do it
yeah,
often. I'm like
yeah, me too.
scrounging down some food and it's so good to just take a pause. Good reminder for us. Okay, my last question, Francesca. If you could put anything on a billboard for all mamas to
Hmm.
see, what would that be?
Oh, toughie, isn't it? Toughie to finish on.
Mm.
So I will focus on something that I think I need to hear, and therefore I think other mamas out there will need to hear this too, is that your hard work now will pay off later. And that could apply to loads of topics in motherhood, couldn't it? But when it comes to feeding babies, as we've talked about, if you have been slaving away in the kitchen and you're making a mess, you're clearing it up, little ones refuse to even try it, you think, why do I bother sometimes? But you're bothering because you care. The love you're putting into feeding your family every snack, every meal, every day will pay off. That's why I came up with Feed Baby Love. The fact that your listeners are even investing their precious time to listen to this podcast shows that they care. Your baby will grow up, they'll have a beautiful relationship with real food, equipped with all the skills and the knowledge that they need to make their own healthy choices. And you're literally doing the best thing you can for their long-term health, their children, as we've talked about. Your hard work now will pay off later.
I love that. It's easy to just forget all the hard work that we're doing and to not honor ourselves in that. And I think just to honor ourselves in our hard work, like we're working hard, mamas. So
Yeah,
thank you so much
yeah.
for that.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to share, where to find you? I will link your Instagram and what you do, but is there anything else you want to share with everyone listening?
Happy if anyone wants to reach out and they've got questions about the things we've talked about today. I love talking about baby food all day long. So yeah, find me at Feed Baby Love on Instagram, and my website as well. So look forward to hopefully hearing some questions and comments.
And I love your Instagram. I love all the food photos, everything you're making. I'm like, ooh, these look amazing.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure. So
thank you. We'll see you soon.
see you soon.
All right, Mama, thank you for tuning in. I am sending you so much support and love on your journey through motherhood. Remember, you are not alone in this beautiful, wild, and sometimes challenging journey of motherhood. This is your village. Please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this with anyone else that you think would benefit. Take care, Mama, and I will see you next week. Thank you for being part of the Mama culture.